we're back with our special guest, Maria Murphy. And we're getting into what I call a fun episode. Maria comes from a background of academia, research, strategy, and all those great things. So we just had a conversation about some of those in our previous podcast. And now we're going to talk about drag performance, voice processing, and all of those fantastic things. Tell me a little bit about how did you get into that? It's very intriguing.
Sure. So my background's in music. As an undergrad, I was studying like opera and art song, mostly singing, but, a little bit of piano in there, some other instruments I play mostly poorly, but, can bring them out after a few drinks at a party, ukulele and whatnot. But I was also doing a lot of work in music history and got interested in, contemporary political philosophies and feminist theory. I was also, coming out. I mean, I still to this day have no idea how I went through almost 4 years of a music degree with thinking I wasn't gay. But anyway, that took some time. And part of what I think helped me figure that out was getting really interested in queer performance, learning, the history of drag, and also, just figuring out how voice, which is such an intimate part of oneself, can be leveraged to explore gender and sexuality, can also sometimes betray the way we want to come across, and just the complicated ways that voice is like a barometer of some of those, just complicated issues about identity and personhood. And so in my PhD, I started working on my thesis, which was about a few different performance artists, Laurie Anderson, Yoko Ono, and Karen Finley. And I started exploring a lot of different technologies, including voice processing. And I got completely obsessed with the really disturbing military history of some of these music technologies. So not to get too off base, but I do think this is interesting. Okay, so think about T-Pain and auto-tune and Share and Believe. You know what I mean when I say auto-tune, right? Okay. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's like a voice processing tool that is typically to fix pitch, but is often its own aesthetic tool as well. It's not just about to keep a singer singing in key. It's also, its own aesthetic technique that brings a certain sound quality when you're using auto-tune. And pitch shifting. Well, that technology actually emerged during the Second World War as a voice encryption technology among Allied forces. So essentially, there would be one Allied force that would record a message. It would go through this vocoder and get scrambled up, and then the machine on the other side of the Allied, the other Allied force country, would reassemble that message. And it was a type of voice encryption. So fast forward to, the 70s and 80s, there's people like Afrika Bambaataa and Laurie Anderson who are now using this technology as a way of exploring music. And so it has this really unusual history and also a weird commercial history. Okay, this is my last tangent, and I'll get back on to, I don't even know where I started, but so what was called the Eventide H910 harmonizer, which is what Laurie Anderson made famous. Anyway, if folks don't know who Laurie Anderson is, she's like a performance artist. She's still around, but she was really impactful around the 80s, doing really interesting critiques of Ronald Reagan and talking about virality and how it connects to the HIV/AIDS crisis and censorship and pornography. She was doing tons of cool stuff. But anyway, the tool that she uses, the H910 Eventide harmonizer, was first developed to speed up television shows so that there could be more ads on TV. So the I Love Lucy show, I think, was the first show to use it. So how back in the day, if you ever had a tape recorder and you fast forward, you were speeding up the tape, you get the chipmunk effect. Mm-hmm. And so the special thing about the H910 was that it could speed up and slow down an audio sample without it getting either that chipmunk effect or that really slow down effect or whatever. And so that was the appeal of this technology. So again, super weird history. Second World War voice encryption technology. Also like commercial purposes to basically speed up the show you're enjoying to hear more ads. And then you have artists who are playing with this. And then there was Laurie Anderson, who developed what she called, and I'll just bring in, this is not an H910, this is called a Roland voice transformer. But she developed what she called
the voice of authority. So hopefully it's pitch shifting now. I can actually hear myself.
It is.
It is. Okay. She would use this voice to characterize a car salesman, or, she would talk about how Ronald Reagan had a certain capacity to make someone to, bring up the political import of his speeches, even if there wasn't as much substance there. And so
she used that technique often typically to poke fun at politicians. And, again, she was mostly, at the time I was interested in writing about her, she was working in the 80s. And, this is the height of like cold corporate. It's cool to be greedy. Like, I mean, not to generalize too extremely, but, this is Thatcherism and Reaganism and, the rise of neoliberalism. Like it's a very specific historical context in which this artist is using these tools. So all that is to say, is that how I got introduced to voice processing? And then for me, when I started performing with some of these tools, it was very fun, first of all. And it wasn't, I think sometimes people hear the pitch shifting and they're like, oh, that's your, you're trying to do drag and do like a man voice. And I'm like, no, actually, I'm just playing around with voice and formant and pitch and register. And I don't really ascribe it along, I mean, I do have a leather daddy persona, so I can't say it's not, I don't indulge a little bit. But yeah, I use it in different ways. And so there is, some performance art that I've done in the past, typically to do with the academic research I was doing. So for example, I sent you a clip, Stephanie, and I don't know if you're welcome to use it if it seems fun to use, but a recording of Anoni's Watch Me from her 2016 album Hopelessness. For folks who may not be familiar with Anoni, she's absolutely brilliant musician, just I think British American. She also is very openly and vocally trans and an environmentalist and doing some pretty incredible work. And she did this amazing song called Watch Me, and it was weird, creepy, like surveillance culture, like, to the state. And so I did this reinterpretation of this piece in my, leather daddy persona using pitch shifting. And it's just a cover, but I tried to play with it a little bit to show the particular political valences that I was interested in exploring, where, gender and state surveillance meet, which of course, unfortunately, we are seeing more and more of that, across the world, obviously in the States where I was just living, but, where, only recently did the states change. Like you used to go through a TSA screening at the airport. And I don't know if you ever noticed this traveling through the States, Stephanie, but when you used to walk through the scanner, this very recently changed. A person, the TSA agent would choose either male or female. They would click a button to determine how to read your scan, which is absolutely unhinged. First of all, the poor TSA agent who's in a split second making some random guess about what their perception of your gender is and putting it, and obviously it's very complicated then because it builds in a certain layer of suspicion that if there's, I don't know, who knows? There could be any number of things about a person's body that is legible to one particular TSA agent in so many ways. And it is a very terrible, first of all, for our safety, has nothing to do with that, but also just the ways that, gender is policed in so many institutional settings is just, horrific to put it mildly. Now I noticed my most recent flight, which I hadn't flown for a little while during the pandemic, I noticed that has changed. There's no, at least where I was flying out of in Maine, there was no button where the poor TSA agent was selecting male or female. But that was the environment that I was thinking about and living in when I started doing some of this work.
I saw it and I thought, I've never seen anything like this in my entire life. Like, this is interesting, cool, weird, like all those things, right?
Yeah.
But like, like it's definitely a way of performance. Like, it's performance art. It's how we're expressing ourselves, and some of the times that we're living through. And it's a different time for sure, depending on where we're living. Even now in Canada, I guess we're living through a lot of anti-trans things and legislations and potentials of where our government's going and what that's going to look like. So it's horrifying yet interesting, yet a whole bunch of things going all at the one time when it comes to the times that we're living in.
Yeah. I think when we had our pre-chat, it was only a few days before that I had received, this horrific flyer in the mail from a anti-choice organization that is now going after, basically trans kids in schools and what resources they may have access to. And I remember just thinking, not that I was surprised, but to have something delivered right to your home. I found it absolutely devastating and debilitating in a way that I wasn't expecting in that particular way. I think in part, my partner is American and they're trans, and they moved here to Canada with me. And not that I ever act like Canada is some amazing, place without its own, settler nation state history and all those types of things. But I was surprised. There was something about getting something, in the mailbox at my own place that was so, that just felt extra harmful. I think because of the intimacy of it having, in your home and arriving in your mailbox, I think was particularly upsetting. So, for me, my performance background is a way to sublimate some of that and to play with that, and also bring a bit of fun and lightness to topics that otherwise feel just completely overwhelming sometimes.
Absolutely. So when you perform, do you do performances with other folks? Are you part of a different tribe of folks that get together, do this? Like, how does it work for you? Because some people are solo performers, others are part of a group that perform on certain different occasions or events, or what does that look like for you?
Yeah, well, to be honest, I haven't done as much since I moved home to the Maritimes. I haven't quite figured out my network here. I don't know why. There's no one banging down my door for a voice processing leather daddy performance. I don't know where they time froze. But yeah, when I was living in Philly, well, again, like I mentioned, some of this performance started as part of my PhD research. A really dear friend of mine who now does arts policy work with various municipalities across the states. Her name is Roxana Filipowska. We did this workshop where it was called Listening to Cyborgs, and we were, doing the type of research on these sound tools, everything from the vocoder, like I mentioned, but also voice-activated listening devices. This is when Alexa was first hitting the scene, which I can't even believe now. I don't think of myself as someone who's old, but that does sound, I feel like that's dating me. But we did this collective. It was basically a bunch of grad students who got some grant money to get some equipment. We had no idea what we were doing, and we were teaching ourselves how to use these tools and thinking through as creatively and consciously as we could about the political implications of their histories and how they're used and all this kind of stuff. So it started out as like an academic research practice project. Since then, it's ballooned into a few different things. Most recently, again, through an old pen connection, Ricardo Bracho, he is an absolutely brilliant writer and director and producer and teacher and activist outside of Philly. And he did this piece called A History of Hands, which was about queer and trans activism in the Philly region. And so he asked me if I would do a performance about Rusty's, which was this old dyke bar in Philly, which sadly was gone by the time I lived there. I did weave through a few dyke bars while I was there. There was Sisters. Sisters? Yeah, Sisters. And then Toasted Walnut was the last one before I moved away. That was a pretty good one too. I loved it there. But Rusty's was it was this amazing tiny bar The Rusty, the person who ran it, was this like hot butch dyke who would wear tickets. Like you'd get a ton of drink tickets at the door, very strong drinks. There was like a lot of, they were raided different times by the police, this bar, and some interesting conversations around, gender roles and sort of butch femme and BDSM relationships was all going around at this time. So anyway, I had an amazing time researching that. And I can send you the recording for that as well. It could be fun to include. But Rusty's, so I did this chanson. So very different from the voice performance that I do with my voice processor, but more like an art song, like a Debussy. Actually, I included this one Debussy quotation in the piano from Chanson de Billetis, which is this, trio of art songs, or a small art song cycle that was, had sort of this, Lesbos, queer lesbian, mythology undertone to it all. And so I took a small sample from that piece and worked it in, but just did it as this sort of dreamy, boozy, like 19th century chanson. But it was like, about hot lesbians, basically. So that was my most recent performance. So a wide range. I don't know what's next for me. I'm trying to currently finish this book project about Laurie Anderson. My PhD research that I'm not actively working on as much now, but I'm still plugging away at it. So that's kind of the focus of my spare time. But I do hope to find my own weird little community of messed up performers here in Atlantic, Canada to join forces with.
We had here in St. John's, we had a conversation with this, of course. Sometimes people, get booked on the wrong flight. So you may end up in New Brunswick or Newfoundland, depending on, right? That posture, yes. And it's quite important when you're booking whether you want to go to St. John or St. John's, Newfoundland. So we had a kaleidoscope. We had a drag bar here, and it lasted probably about a year and a half. And unfortunately, it didn't. It was brilliant. We love going there. It's it's part of the community that we're part of and supporting that and getting to go and just be a part of that. And it's unfortunate that it did close up, but we're a fairly small province and it just couldn't stay open. So I guess now they have performances down at one of the bars here at times. And it's creating that safer space for communities. Mm-hmm. And that's so important and I don't know if St. John's has any a safer space there and what that might look like for community. And when I say community, it's always the 2S LGBTQ plus community or whatever you want to call it, sure, that we're all a part of. And it's, just creating that space so people can be their weird, awesome selves. So show up as you are sort of thing, right? Whoever you are.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, in St. John, there's been a fair amount of turnover with queer bars as well.
Yeah.
And again, I've been in the States, mostly since 2010. So I would come home on like a holiday break from school, and there was this amazing place called Pump for a while, and like very far. I mean, not far. It was still in the city, but like not me friend at the other bar.
Yeah.
And there was this, and they had this incredible hot dog stand outside. I was actually just talking about this with the new owners of Haven Music Hall, which is a queer-owned bar and live music space, and they're doing incredible work. And I hope they have an extremely long and successful career here because I just adore the work that they're doing and the space that they're creating. But I was just telling them that this place Pump used to have it was just this great little gay bar, and outside there was just this this cute old Leslie who was selling hot dogs, and that was like her day. And I was like, man, I hope she is making a buck at this job because. I mean, the queers want their, after a few drinks late at night, you need something to tie you over. And I think that she was doing very well. And then that closed down, and there was another, like a tiny place, I forget what it was called, maybe Saddlebacks. It was kind of a queer Western type, and barely even like, cowboy vibes, but it didn't last that long either, which was just devastating. So now there's a couple of places that aren't maybe designated as queer bars quite as much, but like I mentioned, Haven Music Hall is just a really very cool space. They do live music and other live events, but they also have really prioritized being a community building and resource space. a different project I'm working on within my day job with Bloom Funding is working on a supportive housing initiative for youth ages 19 to 25. And we just hosted with Center for Youth Care, who's running the project, a public forum on youth housing and youth homelessness. And we were like, where is a good spot in the city to, have this conversation that's going to encourage youth to participate and other folks with lived experience to make sure that, people who are doing policy work are actually hearing from the people who should be directing some of those initiatives. And is there a space that's going to give us a deal? Because, this is a nonprofit organization that we were working with, and Haven Music Hall stepped up, and it was a sold out event, and just, totally amazing. And just, I think, shows not necessarily a new, because I think queer bars and queer spaces have always had that community building element and often has been enmeshed in political and activist circles as well. But I think that they are really carving out an important space in our area that I'm excited to take advantage of more since moving home.
Absolutely. I mean, the space is needed for community to be able to gather, get together, whether you're talking about youth or, some of us that are, pushing 50, a little bit older, or even, the older dyke queer community. It's just like, because what you find is that community's community, that we all truly want to, when we get together, it's all ages. It's just one of those unique things that it's kind of at all ages shows up for different, we have different dances and different things here on the Rock. And you find that it's, everyone shows up. Like it looks, it's quite beautiful when everyone shows up, and it's all different. It's quite different than heteronormative communities and what that looks like. So it's hard to describe to friends of mine. You're like, what do you mean all ages? I'm, well, it could be anyone from their 20s to their 70s. So it's like a 50-year span of who shows up, right?
Yeah, I love that. I think there's, I mean, not to, romanticize too much, but I think there's some special intergenerational connections that are typically facilitated in those types of spaces that Definitely. I just, not to say they don't exist elsewhere, but I have not come across those types of opportunities for connection on that intergenerational level as much as when I have been able to encounter them in those types of queer spaces.
Yeah, for sure. Just, I guess we got to, over the past couple of years, we've had Quadrangle NL, I guess, which is one of our biggest supporters here in Newfoundland and Labrador. And they spent a long time getting off the ground, and they finally have a space here. And I guess it's a little bit over a year old now, which is good on them, as well as Trans NL support. Like they got a couple of virtual groups and spaces and Planned Parenthood. And there's a lot of great, I think, groups doing a lot of interesting things. There's some queer initiatives going on as well, of storytelling with, I guess, older queers to younger generations. So it's just interesting, some of the things that people are starting to grasp hold of and integrate. Big Brothers Big Sisters they have a new PRISM program that's meant to be mentorship from, I guess they're working on the name, but looking at, how you be a mentor to, you're a queer person, you're mentoring another queer person. So like PRISM, like beautiful, like organizations are catching on to, like, the need is there to be able to, like, just fully support all different pieces of community.
Oh, I love hearing that. That's sounds like a fantastic initiative, especially, as it's just increasingly upsetting how folks are being singled out and targeted for those exact types of initiatives. I love hearing that some things are really pulling through.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Anything else that you'd like to share with us as we're coming to a close again?
Well, I did bring a little poem that I sometimes read with my voice transformer, so I thought maybe we could end with that.
Let's do it.
What can we glean from a voice? How do we listen to voice? We hear pitch, timbre, tone, color, grain, and from this listening, we often imagine, assume, and construct particular bodies, unique political subjects from which a voice is produced. Before you've even understood what I'm saying, you've already heard my voice. My voice touches you and reaches you in a way my words cannot, and in a way that I cannot control. My voice is like the skin of my thoughts. Its cadence resonates along a signifying chain, sounding a record or archive of my own personal history, however imperfect or incomplete. These types of assumptions about the sound and source of voice lead us to one of its political fictions. That voice conveys immediacy, presence, or truth. Having a voice and being heard seem like they go together, but in fact rarely do. Not because we aren't heard, but because we rarely have a voice. Our voices are not projected, but are themselves projected onto. As my voice is projected in this space, I challenge you
to hear the fiction, the friction, and the production of my voice.
Love that. Well done. Is that yours?
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah. Love it. Well done.
Thanks. Sometimes I perform it as my own clone. So maybe next time. Next time I'll come dressed up. I have an amazing silicone torso I wear, so that would be great for camera.
Right? Absolutely. Who doesn't want to miss out on that? Season 3.
Yeah.
Absolutely. If folks want to reach out, connect in with you, how can you do so?
Yeah, well, I mean, my outdated but my performance website is still live, which is www.mariaelainemurphy.com. But you can also email me at my work email, maria@bloomfunding.ca. I'm also on Instagram, but it's not public because you never know what weird stuff I'm going to be posting. But you can find me there. Well, good luck if you find me there.
And how about LinkedIn? Are you active on LinkedIn?
Yes. Yes, I am active on LinkedIn in my professional capacity. I have so far not posted any of my queer drag performances, but you never know. It could be something I share there at some point.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining us. I appreciate it so much.
Thanks so much, Stephanie.